Why do so many comic shops have a branding problem? And what I mean by that is if you look at their store, well, I mean, compare it to a fast food place, to a Papa Murphy's Pizza or a Baskin Robbins or Jersey Mike Subs or a Great Clips. You can just tell what stores I drove by. Why is it that you get to a comic shop and all parts of it look visually pretty poor, pretty amateur? Not in all cases. There's definitely exceptions, and there's some great ones out there, no doubt about it. But in many cases, comic shops suffer in this area. Why is that? Hey there, this is Perch, talking about comic store branding. And what strikes me about this is comics, by their nature, are a very visual medium. It's about comics. It's about the fusion of kind of art and story and how these pieces come together. And there's a lot of ready-made elements, whether it's a kind of the speech bubble or a thought bubble or action words or these kinds of. There's a lot of branding elements that are exist in every single comic book every single week, with decades of history to show for it. And yet, by and large, these elements do not make their way from the comic to the shop when it's trying to market itself. Many cases, these shops have no sign or what looks like a very, very poor sign on the front. And by the way, there's some of the clue. The comic shops aren't teeming with money. They don't have the big franchise cash of some of those stores I mentioned earlier. So it's not like they can just run out and just buy a giant neon custom sign, but they should be able to do better than what they're doing. And if we go past the sign, we go to the windows. Again, in a lot of cases, you'll see a very, there's the standard kind of open, closed signs. Maybe somebody, sprung for the neon one with a Spider-Man face on it. But the posters, in some cases, I mean, I've gone to shops and the posters are straight up 10-year-old, sun faded, almost into black and white obscurity, and very, very, I mean, it looks old. And why is that? Well, I mean, a couple reasons. First off, as I mentioned before, there's not these stores aren't teeming with money. It's not like you got a big marketing and branding budget to just run out and buy things. Although, with a lot of what comic stores can do today, or sorry, not comic stores, but graphic design shops, what FedEx Kinko's has become, or even craft and hobby shops, there are a lot of options for doing large prints and big posters and other things pretty easily. So there it is somewhat the case of many comic stores are owned by people and have been owned by people for a long time, and they just haven't necessarily kept up with the technology and the different services that are available to them. So that's problem number one. It's just cash and knowledge about the different things. The other is that at times, and it's been somewhat random, the large publishers have proven very litigious for no apparent reason. Like, nobody will care that they've got a giant painting of Superman on their shop, and then suddenly you get a cease and desist from DC Time Warner for no, after like 10 years of having this image up, and you don't really understand why. Plus, there's a lot of horror stories that have gone on within the industry, the retailer groups around, big, nasty, threatened lawsuits and just very aggressive behavior. And the publishers have done a pretty poor job of keeping up with modern technology and the ability to do reprints and other things. And at one point, I think they actually still offer this, although I haven't looked in a while. The publishers would offer what's called a retailer kit, or a marketing branding kit. And it was an area where you could go to a website or to a Dropbox and you'd have a bunch of different art elements, big scale, high resolution images and things that you could download and print on demand, or reproduce on a window or so on. And that was smart. It was basically a way for the publishers to control the kind of elements that these shops would have, to have some say in it, and also give those shops, some marketing, some branding, some things that would highlight their stores, which in turn would, of course, promote their comics. But of late, there's been seemingly a little less, or those haven't been kept up on. And again, the easiest thing in the world, you're already in the business of commissioning art, getting art, processing things out, uploading some images once a year to a Dropbox location shouldn't be the hardest thing in the world, but sometimes it's just asking too much. But the curious part of it is, and it's been my experience of meeting a lot of retailers, a lot of people in shops, is that even though it's a very visual medium, even though the whole idea about comics is about the fusion of art and story and kind of conveying things in a very visual way and these punchy graphics, even though all that is true, still many store owners don't have those natural instincts in who they are. They're wanting to sell comics. Maybe they're interested in it as a hobby. There's lots of reasons why somebody gets into owning and running a comic shop. But I've been surprised how few of them actually have good art sense or graphic design sense, or the ability to look at a comic and say, this page looks good, this page doesn't look good. Why is that? What is designed better on this page than that page? What is this comic doing that that comic isn't doing? And for the really popular, really big artists, people who look at the iconic Jim Lee illustrations and other things, you'll notice it's not just about the drawing. It's also about the layout, the composition, the colors that are used, kind of the whole package. And if you see enough of these comics and you read and consume and immerse yourself in them, then, I mean, at least for me, I found I got better at my composition. I got better at my design. I had an eye for what worked and what didn't. But this isn't usually the case in retailers. I'm not sure why that is, but it has been the case that a lot of retailers don't really even know that what they're doing doesn't look good. They don't see the fact that the front face of their store, the presentation layer, is old, faded, and frankly in desperate need of some rehab. And that's just it's a shame, and it's to their detriment. Comic stores are already fighting a bit of a perception of being a legacy, old, outdated, needs to be put to bed business. And so if you double down on that by having a storefront that looks like it's old and antique and not modern, which is kind of doing you double harm because you're also not hooking off of any of the current movie success or any of that, then you wind up in bad shape. And that's where a lot of things sit. Anyway, it's a curious phenomenon. Wondering how the shops are in your area, what you see. Do you have this problem, or is this something that you notice, or is your shop one of those that does a really good job in this area? I'd love to hear about that too. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking, and let me know great examples or terrible examples. And maybe if there's some terrible examples out there, we can reach out and help some of these folks out. Make their store look better, and help everything. That would be great too. Like, subscribe if you feel like it. Would always love to have you as a subscriber. And follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. And thanks for listening.
So we've had a lot of talking in this comic. What do you think of comics that talk a lot?
They're not good.
Not good. You are not a Brian Michael Bendis fan. That's what I'm getting here right here.